Joining us today is Tatiana Montyan. We will start with a serious subject. In a few of your interviews and videos, you have mentioned that Ukrainian economy is in a war economy stage. So what can you tell us about what it is and how does it work? It works very simply. The biggest money is to be made at the war. So all the efforts are obviously concentrated on earning money on the war and keeping the war going and keeping the money flowing. First off, the main thing is stealing the military budget, lying to people that we're about to be attacked by Russia, that there are millions of troops on the border, on the Ukrainian border. It's much easier, instead of spending money on things truly important to the society, the money is simply stolen. The military budgets are the first and main target of the war economy. So, how does the money get stolen? The more volunteers or forcibly conscripted people, various people off the street, whoever can be grabbed and pushed into encirclements, killed by the thousands, all these people can be used as an excuse to steal a huge amount of ammo, weapons, gear. That's the main profit. Separatists were telling me, well, they really think in Ukraine that Putin is sending us weapons and everything across the border? We just buy it from the Ukrainians. That are the weapons and the gear that was supposedly given to the people who are now rotting in Ilovaisk, Debaltsevo, Lutukino, and other encirclements. UAF is not reporting losses, mainly to be able to steal the salaries, weapons, and gear those people were supposed to have. Well, and of course, if a person is missing in action and not actually killed, his money doesn't need to be paid any sort of compensation. So that's another benefit. And, of course, the checkpoints that everybody loves, where smuggling is going through in huge columns of trucks, and the money for it goes to the people holding the checkpoints. And to get a checkpoint, you have to pay the glorious army huge amount of money. And this has been discussed and discussed again ad infinitum. And of course, we can't forget the category of people that's so-called volunteer helpers. Of course, some of them are naive and stupid and who don't understand that by collecting money for the army, they are doing the job that the Ministry of Defense and the government is supposed to be doing, and therefore they're taking this task away from the government and letting it steal the money, therefore exacerbating the problem. But there are also a lot of people who are actually stealing the money that they're supposedly collecting for the front and the victory, and there had been a lot of scandals like that, and some people are even in prison for things like that. So these are the four simplest kinds of earning money on the war, and this is not even talking about looting and all of that. Yeah, of course, looting, and by the way, it doesn't start at the bottom. In order to be able to loot with impunity, you have to share with the command. And you know, the post office has finally stopped taking shipments from the soldiers without proof of purchase, because they were literally sending washing machines that still had water inside. And how much has been sent by our glorious soldiers back home over this year? That's a huge amount. So everybody is earning money on the war. Everybody who's connected to it, everybody who's connected to people who are connected to the war. And of course, if that's the most profitable venture, then people will ensure it keeps going. And this happens in any country and in any circumstance. It doesn't matter if what we had at the Maidan was a glorious revolution or a huge betrayal. It doesn't matter. The point is, if this is the activity that brings the most money, all the effort will go to earning money there. And yes, everybody is like that. 90% of people are just like that. There are a few percent altruistic people who wouldn't take the money, but the rest would find some sort of an excuse. I need to feed my family. It's not me, it's the situation. As an old Arab saying goes, find an excuse for yourself and you can steal the rug from the temple. So, it's obvious that in order to stop this, we need to create conditions when this is not the most beneficial activity. But, you know, Ukraine is no longer sovereign. I think that after the speech in the parliament of State Department Representative Nuland and Ambassador Payet, it's obvious to everybody. So nothing depends on us. Everything depends on the white masters, and the white masters don't want to stop the war for now. So this is what we got. And when people at the Maidan were being told, what are you doing? You will ruin the country. They didn't believe, or they were stupid or something. And that's not the first time this happens in history. You know, Syria, Libya, Yugoslavia. And still, for the 100th time, there are plenty of idiots who believe that they just need to do a revolution, and as long as they throw enough Molotov cocktails at their own law enforcement, if they destroy and kill everybody who doesn't agree with them, then they will make heaven on earth. And I don't know where we get such degenerates, but there are apparently plenty of them, and they are among us. And then they wonder, why did this happen? Have you been to Crimea? So, what are your impressions from being at the evil Russia annexed territories? I saw what I expected to see. I didn't learn anything I didn't already know, but in order to form my own impression, I went there in person and saw everything with my own eyes. So, what exactly did I see? There are tourists there. There are fewer of them than before, but the Simferopol airport is getting about 110 flights a day from a huge number of cities all around Russia, and before there were maybe a few flights a day because most people came by car and by rail. But since the Ukrainian border at Chongar has been blocked, although by now there's a way to get it, you just need to pay about $30, and they've already figured everything out, they've arranged it with everybody, but rail is blocked for now, so there's no rail access. So these 110 flights, plus the people that come by ferry from Kerch, they can't create the same number of tourists that they had when Ukraine was controlling Crimea. The people who come there on the planes, they hang out in the famous, well-known places. Yalta, Alushta, Yevpatoria, Sudak, Koktebel, Feodosia, Kerch. So that's where the people are. And Kerch is especially lucky, of course, because before to get to Kerch, you needed to drive 60 miles from Feodosia. You know, what was the point? But now Kerch is the site of the ferry where all the Russians come, and that's where they stay because there's no better beaches than there is in Kerch anywhere in the world. And this is not just my patriotism. I've been everywhere on beaches around the world, and Kerch is really the best one. But the places that are not famous and not large centers are completely screwed over. I went down the R29 highway, it's a winding road on the south. Rybachye is completely desolated. I was one of 3 people in a 4-story hotel at the entrance. 2/3 of the restaurants are closed. I went to the local market, a disgusting meat covered by flies is $10 a pound. No, $5 a pound. So that's how it is. Even though they have a good sea. In Morskoye, there was always a cool place. The poorer people were always dancing there, hanging out. Completely deserted. Very few people. Further on, 58th State Highway, there were crowds of people there. There are tents. Now there are a few tents, $1 to get in per day. There are maybe a couple dozen tents. So, away from the big centers, it's completely dead. There are very few people. One Tatar told me in Beregavoye, it's like 200 yards from Feodosia. The Ukrainians knew where to go, knew all the cool places. They always knew the locals, they always came to the same places. They never went to Yalta, they never swam in those crappy beaches, but they went to the cool places away from the crowds. But there are no Ukrainians now, but Russians are crowding in Feodosia, and 200 yards away, nobody's in Beregavoye. Moreover, Russia has their own way of stealing budgets. There are so-called 10% union paid trips. So, of course, they send grannies who come there and are on a tight budget. Not like the Ukrainian mafia who would come with a bunch of prostitutes and drink all their money away. So, the Russian tourists are more civilized. So, in addition, even in cool places, in Kerch, Villa Victoria, all the cool hotels in Gravskaya Pristan, everything is occupied. But the so-called hostels and the slums, they are all empty, because people who make it to Crimea from Russia flew in, they won't go to a crappy slum place. And the smaller hotels are also half empty, unfortunately. That hotel they took from the oligarch, that's half empty. So the situation was the people who owned a few apartments and sold it to local tourists. The Ukrainian government never asked them any questions, never taxed them, did nothing. The Russian government made them register, made them pay taxes. They know how many rooms they have, and there are no tourists for them. So there are several kinds of people in Crimea. First off, extremely pleased are the cops, the judges, the prosecutors, the military, and various government employees. They get huge amount of money, they are totally pro-Russian, completely happy. The second kind are the retired people. They get decent social security checks. Even though the prices increased, they are happy because they got healthcare and they got the infrastructure they still remember from the Soviet times. And Russia is really much better than that. They've seen an MRI for the first time. One grandma told me, "What did Ukraine give us ever?" And Russians gave us free MRIs right here. And various government employees, teachers, etc., they got a raise, the prices increased, it's all the same, but they tell us, you have war, you have crazy usurpers in power, so this is way better. And completely unhappy are the people who earned their own money. The people who rented rooms, the people who owned small businesses, and those who lived in small towns, etc. So they are very pissed. So in 2 days, I drove about 450 miles. I went up to Yalta, went to Alushta, went down the R29 highway, Рыбачье морское, Sudak, Koktebel, Feodosia, and Kerch. And I can't say that they fixed the roads up that much. They've added like 15 miles of new highway between Feodosia and Kerch. They added new highway between Feodosia and Simferopol, but I didn't see that much fixed up otherwise. From the Russian budget, they sent over 200 billion rubles to Crimea from the Russian budget. So that's $4 billion. So this money went to increasing salaries for various retired government employees, to our tech camp, which has been improved hugely, to the airport, which already has 4 terminals, and it's really a very good airport. They keep building it. Over 100 flights a day, as I said, coming going every 5 minutes. I've heard that Sevastopol has been redone, but I haven't seen it because I can't say I haven't been there. But I would say that about $3 billion were just stolen. And of course by the local Goblin Aksionov and various local activists, also known as bandits, that Russians decided to put in power. Plus Yanukovych's people that now joined the Russian ruling party. Now there are tons of corruption scandals. I talked to the Russians that I know and asked them, who did you put in power? These people have been stealing even under Ukraine in Crimea. And of course not all has been stolen by locals, some went to Russians, but that's beside the point. Moreover, locals told me in Yalta that huge number of people from Kiev and various prosecutors, cops, various businessmen, they get a Russian passport, they come to Crimea either through Moscow or through Rostov to avoid going through Ukrainian checkpoints. They figure out all their problems, figure out all the questions, and feel there very well. The funny part is cops and prosecutors who in Kiev prosecute people for being household separatists. So, most likely, Russians will only invest in Sevastopol, Balaklava, in the famous Soviet-era camp for children Artek, and they will invest in the airport, in the ferry, but they won't invest in everything else. So the agriculture will get screwed over, Janko is screwed over, because before it was on the main route to get into Crimea, but now it's deserted. So that's how it is. So yes, there are some people who are Ukrainian patriots and who walk around with Ukrainian flags, who wear the embroidered shirts. Nobody cares, nobody does anything to them because they're not dangerous at all, because the vast majority of Crimeans, even if they are not terribly happy with Russia, they look at the chaos and Somalia that we got in Kiev and tell me, yes, Russian state is horrible, terrible, but it's a state. It's not chaos and lawlessness that the usurpers established in Kiev. So that's the situation objectively. So I went from Moscow to Crimea and then back to Moscow. I have my business there, I do it. As far as how the Russians are doing in Moscow, they're doing fine. Yeah, the currency is jumping. Last time I was there, the ruble was 49 rubles to a dollar, and this time it's 57 rubles to a dollar. But they look at it, and if anybody thinks Russians are such fans of Putin, that's not exactly true. They tell me, yeah, we know everything about Putin, we know everything about his bunch of thieves and how they steal the budget, etc. But compared to State Department funded revolutions, let them stay in power for now. Until they're tired of it, get away. Because Maidan or anything similar, we get the same Somalia that you have in Ukraine. So it's better to have a bad state than none. That's it. Well, that's what the reasonable people are saying. Of course, the victims of state propaganda, they of course shout, we got Crimea, because they don't look at the state of economy, they don't look at the budgets, and they just have their imperial ambitions. But reasonable people who don't have imperial aspirations and look at everything objectively, they still think Putin is better than Maidan revolution. So, coming back to Ukraine, looks like Americans decided to film a rerun of the Police Academy show. So, what can you say about the new police? Well, what can I say? My driving license is extremely old. When I came to Crimea, they rented a car to me just seeing how long I've had a driving license. I am an accomplished judo sportsman. I competed, and I can easily throw somebody so they won't get up. But after 3 months training, I wouldn't go to the new police force, because in 3 months, even with my experience of driving, it's not easy to learn police type driving. It takes a while, it's hard, and it's very different from driving like a regular person. I don't think that in 3 months, even with my hand-to-hand experience, I could be taught to secure a person without damaging them. Because in my previous practice, I never had to do it. Because I didn't care what happens to a person after I throw them or twist them. Because they were trained to take it and to move correctly. So, I think this is all for show. In 3 months, you can't train people, even prepared ones like myself, much less people of the street, which is evidenced by the fact those guys already destroyed several cars. Yes, those guys try, they are nice, they are polite, they are nice people. But when I was at a train station going to Ivano-Frankivsk, 2 guys got in a fight, whatever. So, 1 new police car came. Everybody told them what happened. 2nd car, go again. 3rd car, go again. People were already standing there laughing. Finally, regular cops came and did everything correctly, wrote down the protocol and police report. So, that's all you need to know about the new police force. The regular cops tell me, If we got that much money, if we got new cars, if we got enough gas as much as we want, if we didn't have to bribe our bosses and pay their bosses as well, if we didn't have to do a bunch of idiotic paperwork, idiotic statistics, we have a quota of crimes we're supposed to solve every month, we would be much better than these kids that still don't know what they're doing and won't learn for quite a while. And from a legality standpoint, those guys started working on July the 4th. They had no legal basis. The law has not been accepted yet. They, as far as I know, didn't swear allegiance to anybody. And why are they working at all and what legal justification they have, nobody knows. Who are these guys? Why did we have to bend so low in front of our foreign masters to do this on their Independence Day? I have no idea. Why couldn't we do it legally, correctly, and without putting these nice kids, most of whom actually tried to do something good? I have no idea why they set up like that. And I think the way it will end, some people will become corrupt, some will leave, the new cars will get broken. So that's how it is. The worst thing is that some of those glamorous girls will get their noses broken by some local thugs. Because I look at them, what can they do to a drunk thug? If they are called to a mafia fight in a bar. And yes, especially, they got guns, everybody on the street got guns, they'll just get shot if anything happens. So, best intentions will probably lead to hell. The attention of the Ukrainian people is focused on the events in Mukachevo. Okay, what's there to wonder about? People there always lived from smuggling income, because that's the only thing there. It's mountains, nothing grows, you can't live by growing your own food. The right sectorites who came there were local guys, local Transcarpathia guys who came to argue for their share of the smuggling profits. And this wasn't the first time they came, probably not the 100th, but this time they were filmed from 3 directions, they've been lured there and set up. And who used it for what? That's another question. Of course, Poroshenko had his quarrel with Baloga, so he decided to kick him out of all the smuggling income. So he moved Moskal, who was in charge of smuggling in Lugansk. Now he's in Transcarpathia, so they are going to have smuggling ring across the country. Yeah, that's Poroshenko attacking Baloga. Petya broke up with all his former allies, with Kolomoisky, with Pinchuk, with Firtash, with Levachkin, Akhmetov, all the other oligarchs. He broke up with all the other guys. That's how he is. Well, I guess he stays in power because Americans support him for now, but we'll see how it goes. And since America passed Ukraine back to Russia in exchange for Iran, we'll see what happens. Wait, where do you have this information about Iran and Ukraine? Haven't you seen Nuland and Payet performing in the parliament? Have you read what the Minsk II agreements say? Try reading them. Full amnesty for everyone and all that stuff. Yeah, sure, that was some time ago, and yes, that's what they should have done a year ago, and this decentralization that should have been done from the beginning, which was the demand of the rebel republics in the first place. But what does it look like to the crazy nationalists who were sent to die, and were 50,000 of them have been killed, have been brainwashed with completely opposite rhetoric. No, how do they look at it? They scream, betrayal! Oh wow, we've been telling them that these patriotic shouts are only necessary to steal the military budgets. They didn't believe us. And now, Petya and his buddies turned around, 287 traitors in the Rada who listened to their foreign masters and accepted the Minsk II. Betrayal. Huh. What else is new? Haven't you read what they accepted in Minsk in the first place? So, okay, another question about the changes in the constitution. So, according to you, these have been pushed through by Americans. Yes. That does not matter. That is not... The constitution is just the icing on top of the cake. If the constitution isn't based on normal civil and criminal law and local government and local laws, this is not a constitution. That's just a piece of paper that people wipe their feet and other things on. So all of these changes do not matter because they won't work, just like the current constitution doesn't work. It's all a circus. So Americans pushed through Minsk II to push through some pieces such as the amnesty, self-government, etc., which, by the way, is going to lead to other regions demanding autonomy as well. Everybody will start to shout, why do the terrorist separatists get self-government and we don't, and we have to give all the money to Kiev? So that's what's going to happen in all the regions very, very soon. Because that's logical. Why would Donetsk and Lugansk get real self-government, but Lvov or say Ivano-Frankovsk don't? In the mass media, people talk about fighting corruption, how the government is fighting it so hard and so dedicated. So, what is that about? What have been achieved? There are no achievements. Corruption is winning by a huge margin. The fight with corruption is not about removing corruption, but to be able to participate in it. People that are being kicked out are those who are not fitting in the current usurper government and being replaced by Poroshenko's collaborators and who are willing to share more. That's all what's going on. That's fighting corruption. What about Saakashvili in Odessa? What is he doing there? What about him? He's taking resources from Kolomoisky's people for Poroshenko's people. The apotheosis of this was during the Chernigov election, just recently. They called each other names, nearly got into a fight, and everybody is now anticipating how many of the electorate will show up and who will they ultimately vote for after being bribed extensively by both sides in ridiculous amounts. And, you know, even if Saakashvili showed up to help Berezenko to win the election, he's a former Chernovitsky's man working for Poroshenko and running against Korban, the famous thief and raider. So, and Avakov, of course, the police minister, sends the cops to extort both sides for money. And that's how we fight corruption in Ukraine. What about the anti-corruption committee? What can you say about those? Well, as usual, those people also want corruption money. You know, they weren't fighting during the Maidan revolution against corruption. They were fighting against not being among those benefiting from corruption. Apart from a few idealists who are already disappointed and left. And the rest were fighting to be part of corruption, and if they didn't make it yet, they are fighting to get in there any way they can. One lawyer that we both know has said that after the Maidan revolution, there were two positive things, apart from everything being bad, but two things are good. There's more freedom of speech in the country, and there are beginnings of a civil society. Well, you know, Maidan idiots will never be cured. What kind of freedom of speech is he talking about? I have no idea. Even if we talk about Ruslan Katsaba, who just recorded a video addressing the president, and he's been tried for treason and for stopping interfering with the armed forces. And as far as civil society, what kind of civil society are they talking about if Maidans are ready to kill anyone who doesn't agree with their opinion? What kind of civil society is that? Excuse me. If people are ready to kill simply for your neighbor having a different opinion, we are degrading. We degraded to Stalin's times, and even before that, into the times of Inquisition. But I understand that the poor idiots are not able to claim that there are any real positive developments, so they claim spiritual improvements. But even spiritually or legally, you can't claim things like that. So those who had courage to admit that they have destroyed the country by their own hands admitted it, and the rest say things like that. And of course, the funny thing is lawyers supporting the coup. That shows the level of legal understanding we have among my not so respected colleagues. And now they are surprised that the courts are doing whatever they want, the cops are not doing their job at all, and the prosecutor's office is virtually absent. As far as Ruslan Katsaba case, he's in jail, and he will stay in jail as long as the usurpers are in power. That last day in court that he had was extremely impressive. The witness, he was probably shell-shocked or something. He's a military guy. He was screaming, jumping at the cage, shouting, "If I had a gun, I would shoot you right here." The judge didn't say anything. They simply ran the show and were happy that Katsaba is still in jail. And those people are among us. People like that guy, they are ready to kill just for having a different opinion. And as far as what a decent civil society should look like, is people should understand their responsibility and their ownership of our common society, of their houses and of the state as a whole. And the revolutionaries that we got running this dignity revolution did not understand that revolution doesn't start at the top. You can't replace the top of the pyramid. You can't build a pyramid from the top down. If you can't agree with your neighbors to change lighting in your common rest area, how can you run a country of 45 million people? Oh, we'll just jump at the Maidan and the Europeans will come and solve everything for us. Europeans solved everything for themselves. Why would they solve things for you? What kind of civil society are you talking about? Civil society implies responsibility. What responsibility did those people from the Revolution of Dignity have? They didn't think about the consequences of their actions. When people ask them, okay, you kick out Yannick, who will replace him? If you were the president, what would you do? They say nothing. Because apart from jumping at the Maidan, they didn't know anything. The extent of their talents is gathering tires and setting them on fire. That's all they can do. So about the Maidan events in 2013, 2014, they were called the Revolution of Dignity, and it was done under the pretense that the Ukrainian people are very freedom-loving and they rose up against the dictator Yanukovych. But the events in Ukraine right now are probably dozens of times worse than what happened under Yanukovych. So why don't people rise up? Why don't they organize? Because State Department and Nuland didn't bring the funds, and oligarchs didn't help it with funds and media support. As they say, the popular revolutions not sanctioned by the State Department are not real and should not be followed. Everybody understands it was organized by our oligarchs and by the US State Department. And only the dumbest people still claim there was a people's revolution and not an engineered coup. So now there's no money, nobody supports it in the media, and moreover, if you talk too much, you can get shot or kidnapped. Even the right sector, they stood on the Bankovaya street for a few days and quietly left. I guess Kolomoisky didn't pay them. Or maybe Kolomoisky decided that it's better for Pyotr Alexeyevich Poroshenko to die of some natural cause, diabetes, etc., than another revolution destroying the country. No, I don't think another revolution can happen. And yes, all the oligarchs are pissed at Poroshenko, but they would probably more likely just kill him rather than risk another revolution. That's what I told them about Yannick. You didn't like him? Why didn't you just shoot him? Why did you have to destroy the country?